Hey guys, and welcome to the Random Watch Dude channel. So the video today, the special video that I've got lined up for you today is a comparison video between Grand Seiko and Rolex. Now there's a comparison you don't hear about very often, eh? I mean, all these Grand Seiko fanboys will tell you till they're blue in the face that that Rolex is by far the inferior brand and Grand Seiko is where it's at, and of course Rolex fanboys will say completely the opposite. So guys, I'm going to do a fair comparison today between two dress watches, two 36-37mm dress watches, one from Rolex, one from Grand Seiko. I've got the Rolex Datejust 36, and I've got what's new to me is a Grand Seiko SBGR 001. That's a beautiful silver dial dress watch. I've got them both here, guys. I've got them both. I've been wearing the Grand Seiko for just over a week now, and I've obviously had the Datejust. As you probably know, I've had the Datejust for about 7-8 months. I'm going to do a comparison, guys. I'm going to do, you know, one of those kind of scores out of 10 comparisons. Just keep it nice and easy, eh? I'm just going to give you the list, the rundown of the basically the categories that I'm going to score them on. Specs and movement out of 10. Fit and finish out of 10. There's a Tui right above me. Excuse me if you can hear him just whistling away. Legibility out of 10. I'm gonna rank the bracelet. I'm going to score the bracelet as well as a separate item. Value for money, of course, value for money. Value retention, not to be confused with value for money. I'm going to talk value retention. And finally, I'm going to talk heritage and mana. Right, so here we are, guys. We've got the two watches here. I've got a lovely soft cushioned background for them. I know some of you guys get a little bit upset when you've seen me drop my watches, just put them clasped down onto the stones. You guys get really upset about that, so don't worry, guys. No surface scratches will appear on the clasp during the course of this review. And here we are. Here are the two watches side by side. On the right here, we've got the Rolex Datejust 36mm palm motif dial. Now discontinued palm motif dial, by the way, and on the left hand side we've got the very much discontinued because it's an older model. This is the Grand Seiko SBGR 001. So there is a modern version of this which is virtually identical. The only difference is it's got a slightly upgraded automatic movement. It's got the 9S65 as opposed to the 9S55, which is in this watch. And the logo, I mean, these are the main differences, guys. There are lots of other subtle differences, but the main difference is, apart from the movement upgrade, is the fact that the logos, Grand Seiko now have just this logo here up at the top, and they removed the separate Seiko logo. But to all intents and purposes, guys, this is the same watch as the modern version, which is the SBGR, I believe it's the 251, and this is the 001. So two pretty much identical in terms of size watches. This is 36mm, so they say, and this is 37mm, so they say. I don't have a pair of calipers, and if I did, I wouldn't be minded to check it anyway. I don't think it's a big deal. They look like the same size watch, don't they? So I'm going to start initially, guys, and I want to talk about the specs and the movement. So 9S55 movement in here. I will say, movement-wise, the Rolex has a longer power reserve. It's got a 70-hour plus power reserve, whereas the power reserve on the Grand Seiko is about 44 to 46 hours. If you were rating these watches just purely on power reserve, you'd certainly go for the Rolex. It's got a much better reserve. But to be honest with you guys, apart from that, what I'm basically comparing here movement wise are two workhorse movements. They've both got what they need for a dress watch. They both have very, very good accuracy, both excellent. I mean, this Rolex is running at the moment to pretty much bang on zero. It's only a 7-8 month old watch, mind you. This Grand Seiko is running plus just a few seconds a day, which is not bad for a 15-year-old watch, so I'm pretty happy with that too. So, you know, movement wise, I'm going to say that these watches are about the same in terms of fit for purpose movement for a dress watch. The rest of the specifications, again, I'm gonna rate them about the same. You know, they've both got a really nice bracelet. They've both. I'm going to talk about the clasps and the bracelets individually, separately in a minute. But you know, the specs on these, they've both got sapphire glass. The only advantage maybe the Datejust has is that it has a screw-down crown, whereas the Grand Seiko just has a push-pull crown. There's no screw-down crown there, but no slouch. It's still water-resistant to 10 bar, which is plenty. You might get a little bit of more security out of wearing the Datejust in a swimming pool, potentially, than you would out of this one. I'd rather wear this in a swimming pool than I would this one, but to be honest with you guys, if I was going on holiday, I probably wouldn't take either of these two watches with me anyway. You know, so I'd probably take a dive watch if I was going in a swimming pool. I mean, that's what dive watches were designed for, isn't it? For, you know, for swimming when you're on holiday, and maybe the odd snorkel now and then. Correct me if I'm wrong. So guys, I'm gonna give the Rolex the slight edge on this, because I'm ranking these guys out of 10. I'm gonna give the Rolex the slight edge on this because it does have the screw down crown. For what difference it makes, I'm going to give the Rolex a 9 for specifications and movement, and I'm going to give the Grand Seiko an 8. Now I'm going to move on to fit and finish, guys, because that's obviously, you know, when you're talking Grand Seiko, you're talking finish, aren't you? I mean, look at that finish. Again, 15-year-old watch, you know, you're going to expect it to have picked up a few rubs and a few marks. But I think the finish on this Grand Seiko is actually quite gorgeous, guys. Quite gorgeous. It's the Zaratsu finish, the much fabled and infamous Zaratsu finish that everybody talks about when it comes to Grand Seiko, and Grand Seiko fanboys will insist that is the ultimate finish for a wristwatch, and it's hard to argue. It's really hard to argue. It is a great finish. You know, lovely clean mirror finish where it needs it. There's a little bit of obviously satin polish here as well. So I'm gonna say, in terms of the finish, the Grand Seiko definitely does edge it. And let's be honest, guys, if I'm going to compare it to a Rolex, I would never want to say that the Rolex finish is a slouch either. It is a very, very nice finish. It doesn't quite have the I don't know, it doesn't quite have the clarity and the sharpness on those polished edges. Look at the polished domed bezel there compared to the polished domed bezel on the Grand Seiko. The Grand Seiko is a bit sharper, although it's fair to say that the edges and the chamfers on the Grand Seiko are designed to be sharper, whereas the Rolex is kind of designed to be a bit more rounded. So I think a lot of it, you know, in terms of the Zaratsu appearing superior, is just because of the types of surfaces that Grand Seiko are using, that they're polishing. They're flatter, and therefore they reflect the light a lot better than these rounded surfaces, like the rounded bezel on the Datejust, for example, compared to the flat bezel, the flat chamfer there on the Grand Seiko. But I'm going to give both these guys a 9, guys, for fit and finish, because I will say they're both fantastically comfortable watches. Funny enough, the Grand Seiko is actually quite a thick watch. One or two people didn't like the fact that I called this a thick watch. It is a thick watch for its size, particularly when you compare it to the Datejust. There you go. Let me see if I can get. Yeah, it's hard to actually get these two side by side in the picture equally, but yeah, hopefully that's helping you determine, guys, that the Grand Seiko is considerably, not just a little bit, it's considerably thicker than the Datejust. Hence my statement that Grand Seiko watches are quite chunky. I actually quite like that, by the way, because it gives them a slightly more sporty feel and a sporty aesthetic, and they're quite weighty as well. The Grand Seiko is heavier. I can feel that just holding these two in my hand now. The Grand Seiko is noticeably heavier than the Datejust. Some of that's in the bracelet, of course. I'm going to give these guys, I'm going to give both of these watches a 9 out of 10, guys, for fit and finish. I think they're both excellent. Now, legibility is a very similar concept, really. I mean, look, this is a dress watch. It's not designed to glow like a cat's behind at night, when you wake up at 2 in the morning and you want to know what the time is. Neither of these watches is going to do that for you, despite the fact that the Datejust has got lume. Let's see if we can get a bit closer to look at that. Despite the fact that the Datejust has got lume in the hands and in the indices, It's not particularly good, guys. Don't get excited. If you're waiting for a Datejust, don't get excited about the lume on these watches. Then it's not great. What it does do is during the day, ironically, it just makes those indices and those hands pop quite nicely because it's nice and white. So that obviously contrasts really nicely with the dial. But I don't think there's just quite enough lume in these hands and indices. It doesn't last very long. Certainly if you come in on a summer's day and you go into your pantry or into a dark room, you'll notice, oh, that's nice, you know, there's a nice bit of lume there, but it wears out quick, guys. It wears out quick. And of course, yeah, you know, with the Grand Seiko, what we have here is some beautifully polished hands and indices. So, you know, what it doesn't have in terms of lume, I think it more than makes up for in these really nice contrasty tones on the indices and hands, and that gives it really good legibility. The only time I've struggled with this, whilst I've been wearing it, by the way, for legibility is when the light is really quite dark, and you've just got enough with the Datejust. You've just got enough to, you know, to see what the time is without too much trouble. But I will say, you know, in less than perfect light, it does get a little bit more difficult, and I think it's not necessarily the hands and the indices that are the problem. It's the fact that just with this particular model, I've got a silver dial in the background and it just tends to melt away a little bit. You know, the hands tend to melt away a little bit in lower light, but I'm not going to hold that against it. That's just a dial color thing. For legibility, guys, I'm going to score both of these guys an 8 out of 10. And it's very likewise with the bracelet. As we move on to the bracelets, of course you can see here with the Grand Seiko, nice bracelet. It's a nice sort of 5-link, or it looks like a 3-link kind of oyster type bracelet, but it's a 5-link because of course you've got the 2 polished links either side of the middle link there. I've talked about the clasp. I like the clasp. I think it's a perfectly fit for purpose clasp. It does its job. I'll just put the Datejust down and show you how this clasp works. It's actually, the clasp is tiny, by the way. It's just this tiny bit of metal here, which is just one piece, and it's obviously got the you know, the twin spring locking mechanism there, and look, it's a tiny little clasp, but very nice, substantial here. This is really cool. I like the substantialness, if that's a word. The substance of this folding piece of the clasp here. It's nice and chunky, and it's got a nice click to it. I have no problem at all with the clasp, and the bracelet's really nicely finished, and it's very comfortable. Interestingly, on this particular model, because it's 15 years old, they used split pins. There are no screws in this bracelet, they're split pins, and they are the easiest things. They are the easiest things to remove and put back in, you know, even easier than screws. So I've got no problem with the fact they've used split pins, and they're easy to replace if you break one as well. So it's a good one. I like the bracelet on the Grand Seiko. I like the bracelet on the Rolex. Rolex do fantastic bracelets. This, of course, is a Jubilee bracelet. Lovely finish, beautiful fit. Nice articulation there of the links. I've got no issues at all with this bracelet. It's very comfortable. I suppose something that does bother me a little bit about the Datejust is the clasp. It's a nice clasp, but I just sort of think, I actually think I might have preferred on a Datejust the clasp a little bit more integrated like this one, where it's just got a nice flat profile to it, you know, just to reduce the you know, the profile of the watch. So I think the clasp on the Datejust is fine. It's the same clasp they put on lots of their other models. It's got a nice spring-loaded mechanism in there, and it locks down very nicely with a nice satisfying click. Got no issues with that click at all. It's a good click. So guys, it's okay. It's okay. I think Rolex could have done something a little more specific to a Datejust. And I think they used to do a nice butterfly clasp in the past, and they've moved away from that over the years. I'm going to score these guys for bracelet. I'm going to score these both an 8. I don't think they're fantastic, but I don't think they're slouches either. Now, value for money. So the next subject, value for money, is a big one. Now, I've got a very strong opinion on this. This watch here, and I'll start with the Rolex, this watch, brand new, $13,500, and that's in this configuration, which doesn't have the fluted bezel, as you can see. Now, I specifically chose this model. I waited for this model to come along because I wanted the domed bezel. I'm not a fan of the fluted bezel. I'm sorry to say, I'm not a fan. It reminds me of one of those neck frills that you see in the Elizabethan portraits. You know, maybe Queen Elizabeth or Queen Victoria might have worn one of those frilly neck frills. It just reminds me of a neck frill, the fluted bezel, and that's just my personal taste. I just prefer a nice flat collar, and that's obviously what I've got with these two watches. Value for money, look, 13,500. If I went for the Datejust that's got the fluted bezel, I think I can add another couple of grand to that as well, because it's a white gold. I believe it's a white gold bezel, the fluted bezel. It's a lot of money, guys. Now, relative to Rolex prices, you know, this is kind of almost, I hate to say it, this is almost entry-level price for a Rolex, this kind of money. But I think it's a heck of a lot of money, and I'm gonna relate it to the Grand Seiko. Now this particular one, this is a 15-year-old model. This particular one cost me 3,000 New Zealand dollars, about 1,500 quid, right? So I'm not going to compare the price that I paid for this to the price of this, because this I bought brand new just recently, and this is a 15-year-old watch. But if I bought the modern equivalent of this watch, the SBGR 251, it would still cost me less than half the price of a Datejust. It's quite shocking, actually, how when you do the relativities, and this is the thing, us watch fanatics, we can convince ourselves, we can pick our relativities, can't we? We can pick our facts. And you know, one fact that I've got to pick here, which kind of goes against the Rolex, is value for money wise. Honestly, I'm just not seeing the difference. I'm not seeing how this watch is double this one. I'm just not seeing it, guys. So I'm going to give the Grand Seiko a 9 out of 10 for value for money, and I'm going to give the Rolex a 7 out of 10 for value for money. And that leads me quite nicely onto value retention, which is a different kettle of fish altogether. However, things have changed. You know, 2 or 3 years ago, the value retention of this watch would have been fantastic, because I could have bought it from my local AD and gone and flipped it the next day for 25–30% more, maybe more, 3 or 4 years ago. Now, of course, that's changed now. This particular model will probably always hold its value now because it's been discontinued. And as we know, discontinued watches tend to hold their value. I'm not saying they go up, they just hold their value. But if I wanted to go and buy, let's say, a silver dial Datejust tomorrow, I would be paying probably under retail for it, even for a brand new one. So I'm going to say, you know, when you consider the fact that the value for money on this isn't great anyway to start with when you buy it from an AD, the fact that, you know, I'm going to lose a little bit, that for me makes this an 8 out of 10. It's okay. There are the watches that I would hate to buy and pay retail for and then sell again within a short period. And, you know, Breitling springs to mind. And the other one that springs to mind is Grand Seiko, because these babies, Grand Seiko, they have appalling value retention. They don't retain their value well at all, which is a good thing, right? If you're buying a Grand Seiko as an investment, you're barking mad. That's all I can say to you guys. If you're buying a Rolex for an investment, well, good luck, because I still think that's, you know, shaky ground these days. But if you're buying a Grand Seiko as an investment, you're barking mad. But the value drop on this in terms of just dollars is still going to be less than it is on the value drop on this, relative to the fact that this costs half the price, you know, if you buy one brand new. So I'm going to give value retention wise, guys, I'm going to give the Grand Seiko a 7. I don't think it's great, but I don't think it's awful either. It's not a Breitling sort of price drop. And I'm going to give the Rolex an 8. I think it's okay. I think, you know, of all the watches that you want to retain their value, if you're going to go out and buy to retain value, then Rolex is still your best bet. Now, finally, guys, I'm going to finish with heritage, and I'm going to put these just 2 down here. I'm going to talk about heritage briefly, and this is really important because, of course, you know, people talk about Rolex heritage. See if I can just get that dial out of the light. People talk about Rolex. I'll just move that out of the way so that you guys don't think I've scratched the bracelet. You know, that would be awful, wouldn't it? All sorts of comments about that sort of thing. So heritage, guys. Look, we all know the heritage of Rolex and, you know, the Hans Wilsdorf thingy bob. And I think Hans Wilsdorf actually was kind of a wannabe Brit, wasn't he? I think he was, you know, I know he was sort of from that area of, you know, Switzerland, Germany, Austria, but I think he wanted to be a Brit, you know, and that's why he came up with the word, the name of Tudor. you know, Tudor for you know, for his offshoot brand for the people that couldn't afford a Rolex. You know, he loved the British monarchy, he loved British history, and I think he was a secret Brit himself. And guys, yeah, so look, the heritage of Rolex is probably overplayed a little bit as well. It's got a decent heritage. I don't think its heritage is any better than any of the other Swiss brands. In fact, there are Swiss brands, guys, that have got far better heritage than Rolex. It's just that they haven't, you know, they just haven't been in the spotlight as much as Rolex are. I love the heritage of Grand Seiko, by the way. Obviously, you know, is still really a subsidiary of Seiko. Seiko's got a fine heritage, along with Citizen as a watchmaker. And guys, you know, look, if I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, I think Grand Seiko's heritage, and I'm not going to go into the depths of it now, Grand Seiko's heritage for me is actually stronger than that of Rolex. If you have a look at the history of Grand Seiko, what they've done, where they've come from, the things they've pioneered, you know, the quartz movements, the spring drive, you know, they were making chronometer movements for a very long time, completely under the radar on their own. I think the heritage of Seiko Grand Seiko is a beautiful heritage. It's very fine. I think Rolex's heritage is a little bit overplayed and overhyped. As an example, I shouldn't know that Hans Wilsdorf was the founder of Rolex. I mean, why would I want to know that? But it's just pummeled into my face every time I pick up some Rolex literature or talk to an AD. You know, they talk about Hans Wilsdorf, you know, like he's their great uncle. And yeah, look, I think it's all a little bit of hype. So take all the hype out of it. The heritage of Grand Seiko for me is, I think it's classier. I think it's finer. I think it's more genuine. And it's not overhyped, and I'm going to give that a 9, and I'm going to give the heritage of Rolex a very overhyped 7. So where does that leave us, guys? Where does that leave us now that I've rated all of these watches out of 10 for those 7 categories? Where does that leave us? Who wins? Which watch do you think is the best out of these two? And I'm going to tell you what I think. So guys, yeah, I'm sorry that was such a long video, but it's very, very difficult to compare these two amazing watches and these two amazing watch brands. It's very difficult to compare them in a 5, 6, 7 minute video. It's taken as long as it's taken. I'm sorry about that. So I have one on each wrist, guys, and I'm going to give you the scores now, unless you've been keeping count during the course of the video, which would be very admirable of you. I'm going to give you the scores. So out of 10, 7 categories, total score of 70 available. Grand Seiko 58 out of 70. That's where I've scored them. And I'm not going to muck around and have a drum roll, guys, and leave these really long pauses like you see on the TV talent shows, you know, where they say, and the winner is, and there's this really, really long pause. Don't you find that really annoying when they do that? So I'm just going to tell you right away the score and where Rolex sits compared to Grand Seiko. I gave Rolex, guys, bearing in mind I gave Grand Seiko 58, and I compared them to Rolex, I gave Rolex 56. So guys, you know, the end result that we've got here is that Grand Seiko has superseded Rolex by 2 points out of 70, 58 to 56, guys. That's where I've scored it. And that was a very genuine, impartial, take away all the hype and all the crap and all the history away from the Rolex brand and just compare 2 watches to each other. And bearing in mind I was comparing a 15-year-old watch to a virtually brand new one, so I've had to make a couple of excuses, I guess, for that. But guys, yeah, that's genuinely how I feel about it. I think you know, all things considered, and we have to consider price as well, don't we? Of course, all things considered, guys, I think that the Grand Seiko compares very, very favourably as a dress watch to Rolex. I'm not saying that I think that you should rush out now and sell all your Rolex and go and buy yourself a Grand Seiko. It really is just my personal opinion, and I think it's up to you guys. If you haven't in the past, and I think this is a nice way to finish this video, if you haven't in the past tried out Grand Seiko, if you haven't gone to the AD and put a Grand Seiko on your wrist, go and give it a go. Go and put one on. Try on a quartz, try on a spring drive, try on a 9S automatic movement, see what you think. My advice also is take a look at the secondary market, because there are some fantastic deals to be had on the secondary market, guys, for Grand Seiko. As I said in my review, they do not hold their value particularly well, which is not good if you want to flog it. If you bought one at retail and you want to sell it, not good. But fantastic for those of us that want to get into the Grand Seiko kind of machine, if you like, without spending, well, let's say without spending an amount of money that you might not even have in your budget. So if you're on a slightly lower budget, or if you're not sure, get yourself a secondary market Grand Seiko, guys. Give it a whirl, see what you think. I think it's a great watch. It's that one there. I think it's a great watch. I think it compares just as favourably to Rolex. Take the hype away, take all the marketing away. It compares just as favourably. And that's where I'm going to leave it, guys. That's the end of this video. Let me know in the comments what you think, and look forward to seeing you guys on the next one. Cheers.